As the Arab Spring unfolds, we're getting some mixed signals out of Saudi Arabia. Over the weekend, the king announcing that women will get the vote from 2015 in local elections. 2 days later, though, Tuesday, comes word of a woman sentenced to 10 lashes for driving a car. She's reportedly appealing, but it raises questions over who's got the upper hand in Riyadh, reformers or conservatives. Also, there were protests and crackdowns inside the Arabian Peninsula neighbor countries of Bahrain and Yemen, weighing on events inside the nation that, let's not forget, sits on 1/3 of the world's oil reserves, a nation that's home to Islam's holiest sites. Today in the France 24 debate, is it spring in Saudi Arabia? And joining us to talk about it, we've managed to snatch him from the grasps of the Washington Beltway, Walid Phares, passing through Paris. Thank you for being with us, Walid, who teaches at National Defense University and whose prescient book, The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, gives an overview. Book published, when was it published?
2010, just 1 year before.
Just 1 year before, about the changes that already you sensed inside the Arab world. Women protesting by walking, Walid Phares, that means that already women's power economically is there. It's not something in the future, it's now.
It is happening now. It has a context, and since you mentioned walking, these are the first steps. I mean, and these are the first steps which the leadership in the kingdom knows better than all of us, because they deal with it on a daily basis. They can hear the debates. They can hear what's happening in those families. I mean, those first women who went on YouTube for the first time showing that they were driving. This is a huge breakthrough, but let's put it in context in a very small scale. When the official, when we began the discussion, said, this is a huge, what he meant, it was a huge in the small scale that is allowed in Saudi Arabia. For the viewers to understand, we cannot compare this evolution to, let's say, acceleration of modernization in Latin America. We compare this to a systemic change that, for example, hit South Africa, because there's a whole segment of society which basically needs to be recognized, and then comes the details of, what kind of freedoms, what kind of issues.
And to go back to Naila Faifi's point, are men ready to accept these changes?
See, the way we portray it, saying men, I think men in power are the ones who are dealing with it, because now we have means and ways from Facebook, social media, and other ways that we didn't have in the 60s and the 70s that are telling us that men and younger men are actually becoming more and more supportive, not of the details of what kind of rights the women of Saudi Arabia should have, but of the process, that the process should move forward. I am confident that with time, the younger male generation of Saudi Arabia, which you can see clearly online, I mean, we talk with them, we engage them internationally, they are. But the men in charge of power, of political power, even if they do want such, I think the king would like to move it by inches. They are under huge pressure by a very old system, the Wahhabi system, and that one's going to resist it.
And did that pressure, very briefly, because we're going to go to the break, did that pressure, did it start to be felt before the uprising in Tunisia?
Yes, we saw clearly over the past 5 years. It really accompanies the technology. The more people inside Saudi Arabia started to communicate with each other, the more they realized that they're going to... But of course, Tunisia and Cairo and what happened now in the whole region is a major push for them to believe that it could happen.
In this country, everybody's watching closely what's happening in Morocco, because there's a lot of Moroccans who live here in France, and there you have a kingdom which was once an absolute monarchy, where they've just instituted reforms, and everybody's wondering, can there be an evolutionary rather than a revolutionary process? What do you think when it comes to Saudi Arabia?
Well, first of all, we're talking about Morocco. I would add Jordan. I would add even Kuwait and many other constitutional monarchies. The crossing of the Rubicon has to be a constitution. Has to be a constitution that allows the formation of political parties, which are going to sit down with the monarch and then negotiate the next stage. So this is a different planet from planet Saudi Arabia, whereby the idea of having the source of change coming in negotiations or in demonstrations. Let's suppose the political forces of change are going to sit down with the regime and say, what can we change? What's happening right now is accommodation. is accommodation for some segments of society. It's not a response to a political pressure, and that political pressure is considered as legitimate, which triggers in me the notion of this could be reversed if in the halls of the power inside Saudi Arabia, because that's an absolute monarchy, there will be another monarch who will come later and would say, well, we're going to go back to the Salafi ways. So as long as there is no written document accepted by, I don't want to say an elected, even a co-opted representative assembly, it's going to be embellishment. It's going to be probably the early age of glasnost and perestroika in the Soviet Union, not the late one, when it started. That would be the comparison. In comparison with what the younger segment of society, not all of it, is learning about the world, these, shots of vitamin that we are, moving inch by inch, are perceived as should have been done in the 50s. So they're coming really late. They are moving forward, but moving forward historically extremely late. And with time, the more information is going to come to the youth element, to women. It's by the day now. I think the pressure is going to escalate, and the pressure by the Salafist or the conservative is going to escalate. This is only one spasm. I think ahead of us, we're going to see more than this spasm.
Saudi Arabia, at the end of the day, is it going to retain the clout it's had, not just in the Arabian Peninsula, but in the Middle East as a whole?
That's what they're trying to do by crossing on that bridge into Bahrain. It's precisely to stop Bahrain, in their own mind, from falling into the Iranian sphere. And at the same time, they know that behind their back in northern Yemen, there is another uprising, the Houthis, supported by the Iranians. So outside the issue of discussing reform inside Saudi Arabia, and outside discussing the issue of the future of Yemen, which is still under question mark, there's this whole Persian Gulf problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis are very adamant about it for the simple reason of geopolitics. The entire eastern border of Saudi Arabia, or most of these provinces, have a majority of Shia. And they are afraid, the Saudis are afraid that the Iranians would have increasing influence in those areas. So going to Bahrain is basically to protect Saudi from Iran.
So there's the inside problems and the problems more on a regional level. I want to thank you, Walid Phares. Unfortunately, we're out of time.